So today we're going to take a look at the Christmas present I bought for myself, which is the Oculus Quest 2. Now, I'm just going to say right off the bat for people watching this, just in case YouTube recommends this video to people that don't normally watch this channel, I'm not a VR expert, I'm not even really a gamer, I honestly can't think of the last time I played a game, so don't treat this as a professional review of someone who's an expert in VR systems. Take this as a review from someone who's played VR a couple of times for a bit of fun and decided to get their own system just to play about with. So it's going to be more of a sort of honest impressions from a novice type video rather than an expert review comparing this to other systems. As for what I have used before, I've used a Vive a couple of times, and then I used an original Oculus dev kit many years ago. So I have used VR before, but I'm not an expert. And the reason I've never bought it for myself before is just the price. I couldn't justify over £1,000 for a VR setup. And then my PC is quite old as well. It's a GeForce 770 because I've not used it in 2 years and it was built as a workstation when I built it. So that wasn't really good enough to do VR. So it was going to be a huge expense. But this is only £299. So for £300 I can get a full VR system. And when I say full VR system, I can. This thing runs games itself. It's got essentially a built-in Android device. So you can play the games on the headset. So I won't even need to use my PC. But what sold me on this is if I want to use it with a PC, I can. You can either run a USB-C cable from this to the PC, or you can use a third-party app called Virtual Desktop, which does it over Wi-Fi. Now, I've not tried that. I don't know how good it'll be. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, you can connect this to a computer as well and use it essentially as a regular wired headset. So for £299, that seems like a really good deal. There was the old Oculus Quest, the original one. That was actually £100 more. And this newer one is higher resolution and it's got a more powerful processor. This uses the Snapdragon XR2 CPU, which was built for systems like this. It was built for VR applications. Whereas the old one used the Snapdragon 835, I think, which is just a standard Android phone CPU. So this is a really big price reduction and a lot more bigger spec bump. So it seems like really good value, which probably makes sense because it was literally sold out everywhere when I tried to buy this. I think I got the last one from some really dubious sounding retailer. But yeah, £299. Now that price is for the 64 gig model, that's £299. There's also a 256 gig model, that's £399. So for £100 more you can get 4 times the storage. That doesn't really bother me too much. That's just how many games you can store on the headset. So I'm not going to use this a huge amount, and I'll probably end up connecting it to the computer eventually in the future when I upgrade it. So 64 gig was fine, but there is a higher capacity model that's £100 more. And that's actually a bit easier to get hold of because they're not selling out as quickly. But yeah, this should be a lot of fun. Now as for the other specs of this, which I'm totally reading off the screen right now, this has a resolution per eye of 1832 by 1920 pixels, which is a lot higher than the old Quest at 1440 by 1600, and it's even higher than things like the Valve Index, which is £1,000. So, I mean, I don't know how good it'll be. There might be a difference between OLED or LCD or something there, but it is really high resolution. It's definitely extremely competitive. And then for the refresh rate, by default this is 72 Hz, which is the same as the old Quest, but this one has the hardware for 90 Hz, and you apparently can switch that on in the developer section. So it has the hardware for 90 Hz. So with a software update, they can push out a much higher refresh rate. So that'll be really cool to try out. Now, the only one thing I would say just right off the bat again with this is this warning on the top, where it says Facebook account required. And this is something that did put me off this at first, but for the price, I may as well go for it. Now, it's not as necessarily as weird as it sounds because Oculus was bought out by Facebook, so I suppose it's not really any different to having to use a Google account on an Android phone or an iCloud account on an Apple device. But this will require you to have a Facebook account. And the tricky thing with that is there has been issues with people reporting where they've set up a Facebook account dedicated to the Oculus and they've used like a fake name and not filled the account out properly, and Facebook's blocked it as a suspicious account, and Facebook is really bad for that. And for me, I have been trying to get rid of Facebook and delete it and stop using it. So that is going to be annoying, but I'm hoping I can just log in and just use it as an authentication account. But that's worth bearing in mind. If you don't want to deal with Facebook, you probably don't want to buy this because it is required. And what I'm quite interested to find out with this would be like how much it costs them to produce one of these. Because this is really cheap. And I'm kind of wondering that because this can run the games itself, and that means it has to use the Oculus Store, you're going to be buying your games through Oculus or therefore Facebook. So are they producing these at like a loss or just at cost price, and then relying on the revenue coming from the game purchases through their store? Because that seems fairly reasonable, because it is just so cheap compared to all the other higher end headsets. But yeah, you will need to log into a Facebook account because that's what they'll require. So we'll see how intrusive that is when we use it. But it's a little bit annoying, but I'm sure we can deal with it. But anyway, let's get into this. So inside the box there's this little pull tab, which, that's nice. Just, oh, that ruined that. That would have been a nice experience if I hadn't done it at an angle. That takes it off. And yeah, this 64 gig model is quite hard to get hold of, and it is now at the point that there's a lot of eBay scalper going on, so yeah, you might struggle to find the 64 gig. 256 is widely available, but the 64 gig is a bit hard to get hold of, so if you're trying to get one, look for one now and see if you can find it. And if you're in the UK, one good option might be Argos, because they don't seem to have stock online, but some of the stores, especially ones in like smaller towns, did seem to have stock. So you may be able to get it from there. But yeah, the stock on this was very tricky. I had to go to, well, I had a whole story with curries and stuff, but yeah. There we go. So that's inside. That's quite a nice packaging, just quite glossy. So it reels it, but yeah, that's it there. There's the headset. You've got your two controllers, which are handheld. They feel fine. They do feel a little bit cheaper than, say, the higher end, like the Vive and stuff I've used, but they don't feel bad at all. The other one there. Yeah, they feel fine. It's slightly more plasticky than I've felt on other ones, and not quite as substantial, but doesn't feel too bad. Yeah, seems fairly reasonable. You've obviously got a wrist strap there so you don't throw it through things, but knowing my luck, that'll get put through the ceiling at some point. You get the headset itself to click at last. Box of accessories, see what we get. Oh, how do I open cardboard? How do I work a box? There we go. Oh, they just made this really hard packaging. Okay, so a couple of manuals. That'll just be a lot of safety information to cover them for when people do stupid stuff with these. And then to power it, you get a standard USB-C power supply. So nice using USB-C. I like that. We're actually moving to modern stuff. Just your standard USB-C power brick. Just a standard 5V 2 amp. It's not quick charge or anything. But yeah, USB-C power brick and a USB-C cable. Now, that's one thing to bear in mind this doesn't include is a USB-C cable to connect it to your computer. You could probably use this, but it's not really long. Like this is a charging cable, so you couldn't really tether it to your computer off this because, I mean, good luck doing VR with a cable that's like a meter long, if that. So this is purely to charge the headset. Now, Oculus do sell a cable to connect this to a computer, but it's about £80, which is a lot of money. Now, drop it. Now that is because it's a fibre optic cable, which they claim makes it lighter and a bit more flexible. So I suppose that is a benefit, but equally with my experience of fibre in more of a sort of server and data centre environment, it's a bit fragile if you stand on it or run over it with a chair. So you can get the big expensive cable, but as far as I'm aware, any USB 3 cable will work. So as long as it's a good quality USB 3 cable, because not all USB-C cables are USB 3, you should just be able to use it. You just need to think of like the length and like how flexible it is and stuff like that. I might get one in the future. I don't know if that'll feature in this video or not. But yeah, there's a headset. Finally, the other accessory you've got is this, which they claim is a glasses spacer. I think if you wear glasses, this just puts the headset slightly further out from your face to stop your glasses hitting it. I don't have glasses, so that doesn't make a difference, but yeah, you get one of those. And finally, we get the headset. So what that's telling me to do, that shows you how to focus move the lenses around, I think. No sunlight on lenses, don't use liquid on lenses. Cool, I'll try not to do either of those. But yeah, that's it there. It feels pretty well made. Yeah, these do angle up and down there and there. Got two lenses there. Buttons on the bottom, some cameras in the front. Yeah, it all seems pretty good. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll go away and actually look at this, and I'll come back and actually do a proper tour once I know what I'm looking at because, yeah, I'll be back in a second. Okay, so now we've gone away and looked at it for a little bit, and I can now do a quick tour around it. So there's the front of the headset. Now on here you've got 4 cameras. Apparently it uses these for hand tracking, so you can actually have your hands that can track individual fingers and stuff. That'll be quite cool to play with. And I think there's also a way you can do like a live view through it, so you can have the headset on and still see into the room. That could be quite cool to play with. Don't know if that could be used for like AR type applications or just to see where you're going. But yeah, that's quite cool. Now on the side here you've got the only interfaces on it. You've got your USB-C port, so that's used to charge it or to connect it to a computer. And then you've got a 3.5mm jack, and that can be used for earphones. So this does have a built-in speaker of some sort, so we'll see how that goes. But what you can do alternatively is you can put headphones into that and have them either into over-ear headphones, in-ear headphones. I think there's also the ones you can get designed for this that probably just have quite a short cable. That's probably the only real difference. But yeah, you can plug headphones into that if you want it to be silent in the room, because if you use the speakers, obviously people will hear it. But yeah, that's that there. One thing I would say with just the USB connection on this to connect it to a computer, it's not going to be quite as versatile as getting a headset that has HDMI. Now, while this will work for Windows, and if you're playing Windows games, that's fine, and that's probably what I'll do with this, but it's not like an HDMI headset where it's a bit less proprietary. With a normal headset, you've got HDMI, that's a standard for video, and then you'll have some sort of USB interface for the movement sensors and stuff, but again, that can probably be fairly open to work with. This will probably be quite a proprietary protocol. So it'll be interesting to see what it's like, but I wouldn't want to buy this if I was desperately planning on using this in a computer environment, in say like a research environment or something like that, where I might be running on Linux and using all sorts of weird software. To run this on a computer, you will need to run Oculus' software on the computer. So it's not as flexible as HDMI, and it would have been nice to see an HDMI interface on this, but yeah, you can connect it to a computer over USB-C, of course. Now, around the back, you've got lenses in there. They look extremely complex, but you've got your 2 lenses, and as I mentioned, they can be repositioned, so you can slide them to 3 different positions. So that's the 3rd one. There's a middle one. Probably hard to do on camera. There, and then there's the 1st one. And that's just to help adjust to basically the spacing between your eyes. And what's quite cool, just as like a bit of almost like over-engineering really, is up here, there's this little window that shows the number, that shows the position. So that says 1. You slide it, there's 3. Then you slide it along, it's 2. So I mean, it's a bit unnecessary. You don't really need to have that there. But it's nice to see they're not totally cutting costs to like not, because that obviously would cost money to put in. So yeah, seems pretty good. Feels pretty well made. It's light, but that's a good thing. But it doesn't feel too flimsy or plasticky. It feels pretty rigid. So I'm pretty happy with the durability of this. If you drop it or walk into a wall with it on or something, you're probably okay. Then all you've got other than that is like a power button there, and then a volume button on the bottom. So yeah, that's a tour of it. Next up we've got the hand controls. So that's the right one, and then that's the left one. The hand's printed on that. And yeah, they seem pretty nice. You've got the wrist strap, it's adjustable, it's basically as you'd expect. On top here you've got a few buttons. So you've got a B&A button, a joystick, and an Oculus button. Well, this one has an Oculus button, this one has like a menu button on it. But I think they're basically in the same position, they're just printed differently. And what is quite nice is there's also like a little thumb rest here. It's like a slightly rougher area. And when you put your thumb on it and like squeeze down, it's really grippy. So that's quite good. So if you're not actually pressing buttons in a game and you're just wanting to like wave this around, it's nice to have your thumb on that, and it makes it really easy, much easier to grip. It doesn't slide around, whereas the rest of the plastic would be a bit slidey, so that's quite nice to have there. Then you've got a trigger button on the back, trigger button on the side. Now, interestingly, there's no power button on this at all, so I don't know how they work. I suspect they maybe just wake up when you press a button and go to sleep when they've not been used for a while. Must be something like that. But to power it, on the side here's a little battery compartment that opens up, and in there's just a single AA. So that's really good actually. It only takes 1 AA. You know, you're not having to pile batteries into these things, which is quite nice. So yeah, there's your hand controls there. The other one's basically identical, it's just flipped a little bit and has a menu button instead of an Oculus button. Yeah, that's those there. The other thing I noticed about these controllers that's really good is the vibration motor in them. Now, I imagine that's probably normal with VR, and people that are familiar with VR will be going, well, yeah, obviously it's got that. But they've got a really good vibration motor that's really responsive. So when you're hovering over UI elements, it just has a slight bit of haptic feedback, and it just feels really good. I've dealt with other cheaper devices, not necessarily VR, but things like phones, where the vibration motor isn't very good, and it either feels like it's fully vibrating or nothing at all, and can't really do short bursts, whereas this one really can, so it's really responsive for hitting UI elements or hitting things together you really do feel that haptic feedback, which is brilliant. So what I now need to do is obviously go and set this up. So I'll do that off camera because of course you can't really see the setup process on this because, well, it's a VR headset. But I'll go away and set it up, play about with it, come back with my impressions, and maybe try and edit some horrific footage of me doing VR in. But yeah, this is going to be fun. Okay, so I've now been playing about with this for a bit, and I've got my feedback, and I am very happy with it. First of all, the setup process, that was pretty easy. It was just a case of turning it on and going through a setup wizard. The only quirk I found is that when I unboxed it, the first thing I did was really take the battery tabs out of the controllers, and it actually says to do that in the box. But then when I turned it on, it came up with an animation telling me to remove the battery tab, even though I had done it and the controllers were working. So I actually had to turn it all off, take the batteries out, turn it on, and then when it came up with that animation, put the batteries in, and then it recognised the controllers properly. Bit weird, but apart from that, it worked fine. And the thing is, if that was maybe like a bug that's been fixed in software or something, I suspect this is a very early version, so it might have just had fairly old initial software, because the box that came in actually had a big sticker on it saying like, do not put on shop floor before this date, confidential products. I think it was like it obviously been made before it was launched. After the setup, it then installed a bunch of software updates automatically, so will have fixed any bugs that it would have had like that. The only other thing to bear in mind that really shouldn't be an issue for anyone nowadays, but you do need a smartphone to use this. Even though it's standalone, to actually do the initial setup and log into Facebook, you need to have the app on your phone. But once I had that, that was fine. And yeah, in terms of the performance of this, it's fantastic. In a second, I'll do a couple of little demos of me playing it. I can't really do too much. I've not got a huge number of games. I'm not particularly good at playing games. I want to be a bit careful about copyright with putting on stuff on YouTube. But the performance is excellent. With VR, I'm quite susceptible to like motion sickness, especially if it's not running smoothly. However, playing all the games natively on this, they're perfectly smooth. From what I've seen online, running the game on this might not be as detailed or have as high graphics detail as on a PC, but by doing that, they've optimized the game so they run really smoothly on this. So yeah, I've had no issues with dropped frames or running slow at all, so it's been a perfectly fun experience to play without causing any motion sickness. What's also really impressed me with this is just the overall tracking and stuff. When I've used other setups like the Vive, I've been used to VR where you've got a big massive headset and you've got the sort of emitter things in the corner of the room to send signals about its location and stuff. And this doesn't have any of that, it's just using these 4 cameras. But it can totally reliably track me walking around, crouching down, standing, jumping. It really reliably tracks you walking around a space, so that's really impressive. Likewise, the controllers, these work fine, totally responsive, tracked perfectly fine. So yeah, I was a bit nervous about how well it would track motion, or could it even track me walking around, because it doesn't have those external emitter sensor things. But I can say it totally does. And then for the resolution, the picture quality is also brilliant. It's actually, like, compared to the other systems I've used before, this seems as high resolution, if not higher. Of course you can see the pixels as you can with any VR system, just because the screen's so close to your face. But everything's really detailed and it doesn't look low resolution at all. And the colours are also really good, so I'm definitely happy with that as well. As for the sound quality, that's also really good. Turns out the speakers are actually these little slots here. So even though they're not in your ear, they're close enough to your ear that they sound really good nearby. It doesn't sound like a speaker separate from you. And what I quite like with this is that because they're not in your ear, it's not like earphones or headphones, it makes you feel a bit less enclosed. Because when you're wearing something like this, obviously you can't see at all. So it's quite nice at least being able to hear a little bit of the room acoustics, or if someone walks in or the door goes or something, you're not totally isolated from the outside world. And of course, if you did want that, you can just plug headphones in. But the built-in sound quality is really good, even for things like music, if you're playing a game that's got music in it. So definitely very happy with these. The fit's pretty good as well. I was able to adjust the eyes and adjust the head strap and get it to fit me perfectly fine. The only thing I found is it has to sit very precisely on your face. If it sinks down too much or lifts up too much, it goes out of focus. So I had to play about quite a little bit of just adjusting it around and then adjusting the straps to try and get it to sit perfectly. But once I did that, it was fine. And it's perfectly comfortable and really nice to use. Now, as for the interface, it's really good, it's really easy to use. Had no problems getting it working straight from the start, didn't really have to learn at all. I just did a sort of quick initial setup tutorial and that was fine. And I've played games on this and I've also used it connected to the computer. So I'll do a quick demo of that in a minute. But I've used both Oculus Link, which is where you connect it with a cable, and Virtual Desktop, where you connect to it over Wi-Fi. Virtual Desktop being a somewhat unofficial one. And to be honest, I don't notice a difference between the two, or more so, I don't notice any performance degradation by using Virtual Desktop over Wi-Fi. So I've not even bothered buying a USB cable. I've just used it with a smaller short cable just to test it and it worked fine. But I'm just going to use Virtual Desktop with this, which lets me play games on my PC and have a fully wireless experience, which is fantastic. Now, my PC isn't necessarily up to scratch for doing VR. It's only got a GTX 770. I haven't used it in 2 years and just never bothered upgrading it. So it can't really run the games themselves, but Virtual Desktop performance was fine. If I drop the settings in a game down to make the GPU happy running the game, the performance for streaming that over the network was absolutely fine. Now, that will depend on the quality of your Wi-Fi access point or your router. I've got a good Unify Nano HD, so it's absolutely fine for that. But if you've got a lower end router, you might struggle. But if you've got anything that does decent wireless AC, you're probably able to stream games from a PC to this totally wirelessly using Virtual Desktop. So that's really good. When you're setting up Virtual Desktop, you also need to install something called SideQuest, which is like a third-party app store that lets you install apps that aren't on the Oculus Store. And on that, there's a lot of free apps, which is quite good. Again, set that up, you just connect it to a computer, install the application, and then it sets itself up on your device. And you also need to register as an Oculus developer because you need to enable developer mode on this to sort of load unofficial apps. But again, that was totally easy, and that's got a good range of free apps. So yeah, I am definitely extremely happy with the performance. So what we'll now do is I'll quickly go and jump to the other room, and I'll try and do a demo out. I don't know how good this will be. I've not actually yet tried the screen recording on this, so that could go totally wrong. But we'll see how well this works. I'm trying to come back with a quick demo of it running. Okay, so now I've got it working, and you can now watch me hopefully use this and probably look like an absolute idiot in the process. So I've got it all working, and hopefully you're able to see this recording. And this is the sort of main screen of the interface, so it shows the stuff here. It's all social links and all this sort of stuff. You've got this bar down the bottom here. And with the haptic feedback, it's really good because when you hover over one of these buttons, it actually clicks. In theory, if I turn around here and hold down that, it should recenter, and I'm now facing the camera and don't look as daft. And yes, I have covered the TV with cardboard because I know what I'm like. But that's up here, so we can now browse this. This way you install apps, do all sorts of stuff, but we can try and launch a game. So you can go into here, here's all your games you've got installed. If you've installed any games through something like SideQuest that installs them outside of the official store, they do show up. You just have to go to installed and down to unknown sources, and these are like your unofficially installed games. But we go to installed there, and we can open a game such as Beat Saber. May as well try it. Now, I'm not going to keep the music in from this. Beat Saber have said that they won't do copyright strikes and YouTube won't put it into Content ID, but I don't want to risk it, so I'm just going to cut the music out, but it's not essential. I mean, this isn't a playthrough of Beat Saber, it's more, let's look at me looking like an absolute idiot trying to play this. So if we just pick music, I don't know, just that one. Now we can turn the sound down a little bit with the volume on the headset. I'm just going to keep it low just because I don't want any copyright issues. Put it to easy just to try and be as easy as possible because I'm trying to talk while doing this. But the performance of this is fantastic. Like, it's super responsive. The haptic feedback I'm getting is brilliant. And in terms of like just me walking around the space, that's working perfectly fine. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's very hard to talk while playing this, but see if I duck down, it actually tracks that correctly. So honestly, I cannot fault the performance of this. This is working brilliantly, and it's just so much fun. And it's just having it built into the headset for games like this, especially the sort of party type games. It's great because you can take it away with you. You can take it to people's houses. You don't have to have a big PC set up and have all that infrastructure. You can just take just the headset and play a game with this level of performance, and it's super smooth. I'm susceptible to quite low frame rates, and this just isn't a problem at all. So there you go. That's it working with Beat Saber, and it works absolutely brilliantly. So while I'd love to keep playing this, I don't want to bore people with me playing Beat Saber, even though this is probably hilariously entertaining to try and watch. But if I get out of this now, hit that button there, that's me quit. That's what's taking this sort of pause screen, so I can hit quit, and that'll take me back out. The other thing we'll take a look at is Virtual Desktop, which is how we can stream games from another computer. If we were to just use the standard Oculus Link, you just plug it in. It pops up saying, do you want to use Oculus Link? And you hit yes. It's dead easy. With Virtual Desktop, I had it set up there. So here you can see what the Virtual Desktop interface. Here's my desktop here. Now, up here it says it's limited to 400 megabits and streaming performance will be degraded. Now, I don't quite get that because my access point is 4x4 MIMO AC Unified Nano HD. So it can do way higher than that. But the performance with this is absolutely fine at 400 megabits. So I don't know what that's really complaining about, but it is pretty good. So if we go out of that, we can go down to here and we can get rid of that menu. Here we have my PC's desktop and I can just look at my computer like this and can walk closer to it, that's too far, walk further away, you can move it around, do silly stuff. You can pretty much watch a film on this if you wanted, and it's quite a cool effect. But what we can do is we can open up a game. So if I were to, first of all I want to open Steam VR, so we hit launch Steam VR there, and that's going to launch Steam VR on the computer. Now the key thing here is just to bear in mind, this computer is really underpowered. It's a GTX 770 and a Ryzen 1700X. The CPU is fine, but the GPU is far too old. So the games will not perform as well as it will on a much higher end GPU. Now, SteamVR's home doesn't load properly for me, but I think that's this PC. But if we hit this menu here, it'll pull up a list of installed games. So we'll just try this Paint one. It's just quite a quick, simple game that does perform okay on this machine. And I'll definitely get a new graphics card at some point to actually play these properly. But up comes the game. And there we go. So we're in theory, we're in here, we can just sort of walk around. And the first thing I'll show you now in a sort of sandbox is if I walk around the space here, you can see the boundary that the game puts up. That's a sort of safety boundary that I've predetermined by drawing lines around the room. So this is where I can safely walk without walking into things. And that works really well, and it's quite subtle. And what's actually really cool with this is if you walk outside of your boundary, like this, the cameras turn on. So I don't know if this will capture in the recording, I hope it will, but this is actually showing my live camera feed. It's a bit glitchy, but it says return to play area, but as a safety thing, if I walk out of the camera's view, or out with the boundary, it actually shows me where I am so I don't get lost or fall over things. Because I have done that before and I have tripped over things before. But yeah, it's really cool. And then we can, in theory, I didn't mean to do that one, but in theory we can draw using this. There we go, that's what I wanted. Change the colour, there you go. And there you go. And if you look at how smooth this is, bearing in mind this is streamed over Wi-Fi from a very underpowered computer, I'm sure you'll agree the performance of this is absolutely fine. It actually seems really responsive. So yeah, it's really quite cool. So yeah, oh, that's a TV. That's why I have cardboard on it. But yeah, this streaming from a computer is actually really reliable, so I am dead happy with how well this works. So yeah, I suppose that's really all there is to show. I mean, I could probably go into way more time about showing all the actual different games and all that sort of stuff, but there's better videos out there showing VR games. This is just looking at the performance. And from what I found, running games either on the headset or using virtual desktop to stream them is brilliant. This performance of this is fantastic. So there you go, that was my review of the Oculus Quest 2. And as I've said throughout this, I'm really impressed with it. Getting this as a cheaper device, I kind of thought it might not be fantastic. I thought it might be good enough, but maybe not feel amazing. But as far as I can tell, it's fine. As I mentioned, I've used things like the Vive before, and even though I'm not doing a head-to-head comparison, and I imagine changes might show up if I was doing something head-to-head, but thinking back to, many months, if not a year ago, to when I last used a Vive, I don't really feel this is much worse in any way, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's better or anything, but it doesn't feel like it's significantly worse or has any major sort of shortcomings compared to that. So I'm really happy with the performance. Now, sure, it doesn't have maybe all the features of the higher end ones. You've not got things like eye tracking or mouth tracking and things like that. But for the features it does have, it's really good. And with things like virtual desktop, being able to stream games from a computer to this over Wi-Fi is fantastic because I don't need to worry about cables. And in my situation, my desktop's in a different room from my living room. So I'd rather play VR in the living room because there's more space, but I don't have to move my PC through. So it's actually really good being able to turn the PC on in my office, go through to the living room, and then play games on this running from the PC. So yeah, for the performance, I'm extremely happy. I think with this, the only downside is the whole Facebook link and association, because it does feel a little bit unnecessary that you have to log in with a Facebook account. And from a privacy perspective, it's not the worst thing ever. It's not really in some ways different like logging into an Android phone with a Google account. This is essentially made by a Facebook-owned company. there's just a few things you need to watch out for, and it's things like when I first set it up, went in, and then the immediate thing that comes up, it comes up with a list of Facebook friends and goes, oh, these friends you've got all have Oculus, and here's all their Oculus usernames. So unless you go into your settings and turn all the privacy settings off, that means Facebook friends that got Oculus could then see your Oculus username and see that you've got Oculus and potentially view your profile and things like that. So it's fine, but there is that privacy link there with Facebook, and it is a real downside. Now, it really comes down to your, sort of how you feel personally about that. I'm probably bad enough that I'll sell out and buy the cheap VR headset, even though I have to sell my soul to Facebook, just because it's a really good value device. But that is definitely a bit of a disadvantage. So that's the only real issue I can really find with this. The hardware is excellent, the software is really good, the performance is amazing. You just kind of have to tolerate the whole Facebook association with it. But yeah, definitely very happy with this. So thank you very much for watching. And if you're interested in buying this, there's maybe going to be links in the description. I don't know what the stock's like on this. It's a bit all over the place. But hopefully if you can get hold of one of these, you'll be very happy because it's a really good device. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.